Shalom. I'm Rabbi Michael Panitz of Temple Israel of Norfolk, Virginia, and I'll be speaking with you now on the subject, You Have the Power to Bring God Near. Consider the following domestic scenario. A little child does something that's selfish, that's hurtful, and her mother remonstrates with her. She says, "What you've just done hurts Mommy's feelings." That's often enough to give the child pause. After all, once a child begins to learn the golden rule, she knows that she would not like it if someone did something to hurt her feelings, so it would be wrong for her to hurt Mommy's feelings as well. But what if this little child is on her way to pre-law? What if she's both precocious and argumentative? What if she says to Mommy, "I hurt your feelings? That's not possible. You're so much bigger and stronger than I am. You're just saying that to make me feel guilty." I think that the mother would be still more disappointed with her child at that point. Indeed, the consequences that would befall the child might become suddenly more severe than would have been the case had the child simply pouted or cried. I've begun with this domestic analogy because I want us to think about our own theological imaginings. We say that God is perfect. God doesn't need the world in order to exist. The world, rather, needs God. That language, the language of God's perfection, God's omnipotence, is a big part of our religious tradition. It's our way of saying that God is not simply the strongest being within our world. God is literally out of this world. But that's not the way the Bible talks about God. The Bible speaks of God's deep disappointment in human behavior. Before the flood, God is described as having regretted creating so destructive a creature as the human. Regret is an emotion. After the Bible, Judaism continued to develop. Jewish philosophers focused on God's perfection and omnipotence, but the rabbis in general followed the Bible's description of God as passionate, not dispassionate, passionately concerned with how we live our lives. We matter to God, and therefore, when we abuse our human powers and harm each other, we affect God. The point is not to decide who is correct, the Jewish philosophers or the rabbis. The point is to understand the implications of each group's discourse. The philosophers wanted us to have a clear picture of God that would not insult our intelligence. The rabbis wanted us to have vivid, poetic images of God that would inspire us to live correctly. In fact, we can and should appreciate both. The portion of the Torah that Jews will be reading this coming Shabbat includes the book of Numbers, chapter 7. That chapter is a description of the offerings that the chieftains of the 12 tribes of Israel made during the dedication ceremony of the tabernacle. The tabernacle was the capstone project for the Israelites living in the wilderness during the year after they received the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai. They volunteered their assets and their talents to build a beautiful box to contain the 10 Commandments. They also created altars for the sacrifices they were going to present to God, robes for the officiating priests, and beautiful coverings for the enclosure that delineated the entire sacred space. Finally, the tabernacle was ready, and in this chapter, it was dedicated. The chapter begins with the expression, "On the day that Moses completed erecting the tabernacle." The rabbis were intrigued by the word completed, in Hebrew the word kalot. The Bible could have simply said on the day that Moses erected the tabernacle. The word completed suggested that we think about the process which Moses brought to a conclusion. We Jews read the Bible at different levels. The literal reading understands this verse quite logically. The various artisans did the actual work, and the men and women of the tribes, in general, donated the items that the artisans worked with. But Moses presided over the entire project, and he was credited with its conclusion. But there's also a poetic level of reading the Bible. This is called midrash. It seeks to tease out messages from the Bible that go beyond the literal. The purpose of midrash is to make the Bible speak to future generations, to you and to me. Here's the poetic approach to the phrase, completed erecting the tabernacle. The word completed, kalot in Hebrew, is a homonym. The same word means brides, kalot. This sound similarity made the rabbis think of the book of Song of Songs, which is the love poetry of the Bible, understood by the rabbis as the love between God and Israel. So, on the bridal day of Moses finishing the tabernacle, Moses finished the tabernacle, and God was willing to enter as an act of intimacy. See, the Israelites had been estranged from God. They sinned. They created the golden calf. God wanted to abandon them. Moses talked them out of it. God wanted to let an angel lead them through the wilderness. Moses talked them out of that. Moses said, it's got to be you. We built the tabernacle, and God entered it. That was the climax of reconciliation, God's presence filling the space that we had made. We can relate this old story to our situation today. Today we deal with two kinds of empty sanctuaries. The first kind of sanctuary is literally empty. Our sanctuaries are empty for reasons of public health. We hope and we pray that we will get through this pandemic and soon we'll be filling these sanctuaries again. And I pray that we'll be filling them with our hearts, not only with our feet. But there's a second, a poetic way in which sanctuaries are empty. The world is supposed to be a sanctuary. We have the power to drive God far away from our sanctuary, from the world, or to bring God near. COVID-19 is the pandemic that's kept our sanctuaries empty in a literal sense. But racism-19 is the pandemic that's kept our world sanctuary, our society sanctuary empty in a damaging sense. Moreover, it's not just racism-19. It's racism-20, and it was racism-18, and it was racism-17, and it was racism-16. In fact, racism every year of our country's existence is the terrible sin of America. And once again, this pandemic is in an outbreak stage. Let's use this moment to delegitimize it. What our Bible story and its rabbinic reading is telling us is that when we do that, when we begin to live with each other on the basis of respect and love, then, and only then, we are finally making our entire society a sanctuary where God can dwell. You have the power to drive God away. That's what people have done. Tear gassing innocent and lawful protesters in order to walk through the space they had been occupying and then pose with a Bible in front of a church, that's not an action pleasing to God. If you want to let God into the sanctuary that you're going to build, you have to open your heart to your fellow human. Amen.